name is Jeff McElravy, and I'm the Finance Director for Colerain Township. Today, I'm going to take a few minutes to talk a little bit about how the township raises and spends your tax money. So how does property tax work? It's messy. Let's begin with how the market value of your home is established. Every 3 years, the Hamilton County Auditor conducts a review of the value of every property in the county. This is based on recent sales and macroeconomic data. And then every 6 years, the auditor conducts a physical appraisal of every property in the county. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the average home in Colerain has a market value of $123,200. To make the math easier, let's use $120,000 as a nice round number. First, the auditor takes the market value and reduces it to its assessed value, which is 35% of the market value. So $120,000, the market value, times 0.35, the assessment factor, leads us to $42,000 as the assessed value. There are 15 entities that levy a portion of the total property tax, and we'll show you which groups get how much in a bit. For now, let's get through the math. The current tax rate in the township is 113.27 mils. At least that's the rate for most of the township. It's a bit higher for residents that are part of the Mount Healthy School District. So let's take that $42,000 assessed value, multiply it by 0.11327, and that leads us to $4,757.34, which is the tax that would be paid at the full rate. But nobody pays the full rate. There's something called a reduction factor that reduces the rate. For residential property, it reduces the rate to 73.018266 mils. So that $42,000 assessed value times that rate leads to a tax payment of $3,066.77. That would be the effective rate, but that is still not the tax paid on the average home. There are 3 credits that reduce the tax bill further: a non-business credit, an owner occupancy credit, and a sales tax credit. For seniors, there may also be a homestead reduction. These credits fluctuate from one year to the next. For taxes paid in 2021, the non-business credit is 0.75828, and the owner occupancy credit is 0.018957. So let's go back to that effective tax of just over $3,000 and apply the non-business credit, which totals $232.55. And we'll do the same thing with the owner occupancy credit, which totals $58.14. And then the same thing with the sales tax credit, which equals $15.22. So the actual annual paid is the effective tax minus the credits, or $2,760.86, or 2.3% of that $120,000 market value. That bill is split into 2 payments, the first due in January and the second in June of each year. Now, back to those 15 jurisdictions that receive property tax. The breakdown of who gets what looks like this. As you can see, the school district and the township are the top 2 recipients of property tax, with the balance going to a variety of county functions, the library system, and the zoo. So what do your township property taxes pay for? A lot, actually. Colerain collected $17.8 million in property tax last year, which is just over half of all the revenue that we collect. Most of that revenue, 88% in fact, is invested in police and fire services, which pay for the services that most people think of, such as emergency calls from medical, fire, or police services, as well as a series of preventative programs. It's worth mentioning that both the police and fire and EMS departments have earned national recognition for their work. Our fire and EMS service is one of only a few agencies in Ohio to be rated as a Class 1 fire department, which puts them in the top 99% of all departments nationally. Similarly, our police department has received the Gold Standard Law Enforcement Accreditation with Excellence Award, which is a mouthful, but what it means is that it's recognized as a department that adheres to national best practices and demands excellence from its officers. Fewer than 1% of police agencies in the entire United States have attained that level of accreditation. Okay, now back to property taxes. About 5% of the property tax collected by the township is invested in township roads. Colerain maintains 115 miles of roads, including salting and plowing those roads during the winter. The general fund receives just under 3% of the property tax collected each year. These revenues support the general operations of the township and also subsidize the park system, the community center, and our economic development efforts. And the balance of the property tax that is collected goes to the township's TIF districts for economic development projects. What makes up the rest of the money collected by the township? In addition to property tax, there are 3 major buckets of revenue for the township. The first is called licenses, permits, and fees, and those bring in just over $5 million, or 15.5% of all revenue. This pie chart describes this bucket in more detail. $676,000 come from cable franchise fees, which are collected from the cable companies for use of the township right-of-way. $1.36 million is solid waste fees that are collected from Rumpke and Waste Management based on the amount of solid waste that is deposited in the landfill each year. $1.25 million is from the Rumpke 25 consent decree. $1.4 million are reimbursements for EMS ambulance runs. $215,000 are fees collected by the police department for impounded vehicles. $165,000 is for building permits and vacant building registry fees. The second big bucket is called Intergovernmental Revenue. As the name implies, these are funds that the township receives from other governments, which are almost always from the state. Last year, this bucket accounted for almost $5 million, which was about 15% of all revenue. The third bucket is basically everything else. This bucket brings in about $2.6 million a year, or about 8% of total revenue. 96% of this revenue in the miscellaneous portion of the pie chart is related to contracts for police services, drug seizures, the premiums that our employees pay for their health insurance, and other smaller revenue items, such as the recycling incentive. 4% of that revenue comes from the rental of shelters in our parks or from our community center. The last bucket brings in 1.5% of total revenue. This is comprised of several different revenue types, such as investment earnings, special assessments, charges for services, and fines and forfeitures. We'll skip the pie chart for that one. So how is that money spent? Like most organizations, the vast majority of the township's expenses are its people. There are about 260 people who serve the people of the township, which is a mix of full-time, part-time, and seasonal employees. About 80% of those employees work in our police and fire and EMS departments. We organize our budget the same way that we organize our work, through a strategic planning process. For 2021, the 3 big themes are prosperous, green, and clean. Those themes are translated into goals and initiatives tied to performance measures so that we can track our efforts to see if we are effective in moving us closer to being a community that is more prosperous, green, and clean. There's a lot of ways to look at expenses, but we're going to look at the expenses of the overall township based on program and based on type. As you can see from the pie chart, our expenses by program look like this. The largest ones are for public safety, followed by public services, which includes our parks, road maintenance, and the community center, general government, and planning. If you look at the expenses by type, salaries are by far the largest expense. That's followed by purchase services, employee fringe benefits, other financing uses, capital outlay, debt service, supplies and materials, and the last 4% covers miscellaneous expenses. Transparency is important to us here at the township. To learn more about the goals, initiatives, revenue, and expenses of an individual department, and a whole bunch more, check out Colerain.org. If you scroll down to the bottom of that page, you'll see a link to our transparency portal. Click on that and you'll have access to years of information about how the township conducts its business on your behalf. Thank you for your interest in Colerain Township.